Hi, everyone, and welcome to StudioJake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. Now, as you can see, my in home studio is going through a little bit of a redo, so please be patient with me. I appreciate it. Welcome to my vidcast where I talk about all things pop culture, from anime to film to celebrities being crazy. I pretty much cover it all. And like I said, as you can see, I'm going through a little bit of a revamp. I would appreciate your patience as I kind of still work things out. Obviously, didn't have time to hide my cords and all of that. So I would appreciate your patience, that you would like, share, and subscribe and help me reach 1,000 subs. I would really appreciate that. So I've got some bad news for you. Yeah, it's pretty bad. So, Zack Snyder, he of course was the original chosen one to lead what was then known as the DCEU, the DC Extended Universe, of film franchise based on the DC Comics. He launched with Man of Steel, then of course did the sequel Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice, as well as Justice League, or Zack Snyder's Justice League as it's been called for some reason. I'm kidding, I know the reason. Well, guys, you're just too stupid to understand his vision. You're dumb. You're stupid. I hate to break it to you. Hey, that's not me. This is Zack Snyder. So, during a Q&A, and this is from Fandom Wire, Zack Snyder said, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, I would go with that instinct there, Zack, but I feel like a lot of people went into the superhero, excuse me, but I feel like a lot of people went into the movies for going like, oh, it's the superhero romp, let's have fun with it. And we gave them this sort of hardcore, deconstructionist, heavily layered, experimental, modern mythological superhero movie that you really need to pay attention to. Come on, Zach. Listen, I would like to point out, yes, it was hardcore deconstructionist, but the characters didn't need to be deconstructed. They already have all of these epic years of lore and canon. They didn't need that kind of deconstruction. No one wanted to see Superman as a little whiny crybaby who acts like an angsty teenager into his 20s. No one wanted to see the Punisher dressed up as Batman. And certainly no one wanted to see the two of them crying about their mommies together. No, it did not, and it wasn't hardcore. He is not a hardcore director. I don't care what anyone says. Sure, he's great visually, except in Army of the Dead, which was just a bad movie. But he's not hardcore. What he does is he puts all these angsty elements. He puts some sad core stuff in it, and then he calls it hardcore. It's not hardcore. He said heavily layered. It is the most vapid, vain look at superheroes I've ever seen. Come on now, there is absolutely no heavy layers to Man of Steel, to Dawn of Justice, to his version of the Justice League. I would argue that the theatrical version of Justice League is more heavily layered. He just kind of throws all this stuff together, puts scenes in slow motion, puts this weird sounding music into everything, and then says it's heavily layered. Everyone can see right through him. It's as surface level as you could possibly get. Experimental, modern, mythological superhero. Okay, I know these words probably appear on his word a day calendar, but come on now. These were not. I agree that superheroes are modern myths. I have said this many times, but his stuff is not his stuff is not experimental, experiential. As he put it, it's not that. It's he how is making Batman and Superman cry about their mommies together experiential? We don't need to see that. We don't want our modern myths experimented with. Like I said, Superman and Batman and to an extent Wonder Woman, all of them, like I said, have layers of canon and lore, and we don't want them messed with. I don't know why Hollywood thinks this way. It's so funny because everyone always tells me, "Oh, Zack Snyder, he's such an outsider." He's not an outsider. He's an insider. He's constantly going to these things. He's constantly getting trained seals in his cult to clap for him. I tell you, I really don't get this attack. I'm going to attack the audience. Listen, if you know what your audience is expecting, why are you upset when they're disappointed? Zack Snyder is a hack. He, with the exception of 300, and okay, I guess that Owl animated movie he did, his movies are all terrible. He's never, like I said, outside of those two, he's never done even a good movie. He's always done like sort of mock films where he'll like riff off someone else and then wants to take credit for it. So like Man of Steel, he was obviously trying to copy Christopher Nolan, who did produce Man of Steel, and he did a terrible job. Superman isn't meant for that. Superman is supposed to be optimistic. He's supposed to be hopeful. But no, we got sad core Superman who can't even be bothered to save his dad from a tornado. And that's one of the things that offends me most about the Man of Steel is how Jonathan Kent was treated. Now, nothing against Kevin Costner who portrayed Jonathan Kent. He's a decent actor, but the way he was written, where he's just this bad father who puts down Clark all the time, who doesn't even bother trying to mentor him. He just tells him his powers are something he should be ashamed of and he should hide them. And granted, Superman does need a little bit of a disguise because people will try to come after, the Clark Kent. But it was just this bizarro. It was more about bizarro. A retelling of the Superman myth that no one wanted. And same with Batman, how Batman is portrayed in Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, where now Batman is not above beating some criminals up, I'm sure, but especially the theatrical version made it seem like Batman almost wanted his mark to get people to die. And Batman's whole thing is he's not an executioner. He's a judge, he's a jury for sure, but he doesn't do that. So even sort of peripherally, causing people to die by intentionally marking them. Now, in the extended edition or whatever it's called, it did show that it was Lex Luthor who was actually paying people to get people with the Batman mark killed. Didn't matter in my opinion because he was still had a mounted machine gun on the Batmobile. This is Batman we're talking about. Batman, for one thing, even if you wanted to say, hey, I'm going to make a case for Batman killing, okay, but he would never endanger civilians that way. Could you imagine if a stray bullet bounced off of one of the bad guys' cars or the bad guys' cars exploding, caused some homeless man to die? That's what Batman was doing in those movies. It was a total. He was right. It was a deconstruction. No one wanted to see that. Even if you wanted to do something that sort of, in the director's mind, uplifted the narrative, like what Christopher Nolan did with the Dark Knight trilogy. And even what Joel Schumacher tried to do with Batman Forever, even if you wanted to somehow uplift the story and come at it from a different angle, people still go into a Batman or a Superman or a Wonder Woman, or we can even go with Marvel, a Spider-Man movie with certain expectations. And listen, this whole idea where Hollywood thinks that they have to subvert your expectations, it's total bunk. And Snyder is the king of this. Even with his upcoming movie Rebel Moon, he stole the title from a Vox Day written video game and some of the premise if you actually read his official synopsis. And he also is taking from Magnificent Seven and Star Wars. It was originally supposed to be his Star Wars pitch, but Disney laughed him out of the room at a time when they were desperate for directors to hop on board with their projects. They laughed him out of the room. So, I don't really see this going anywhere. I just think it's so insulting when these elitist Hollywood insiders mock audiences because they came into Batman expecting Batman to be, the Dark Knight, a beacon of justice, a dark detective. But instead what they get is a Punisher knockoff, which is exactly what Batman was. The whole Martha scene was an embarrassment. That alone should have gotten Zack Snyder fired. What an embarrassing scene that he wrote and directed. I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's so stupid. Martha! Martha! For one thing, the scene doesn't make sense. When Superman lands, he doesn't address Batman as Batman, right? He says, Bruce, and then they engage in their little, fight. Right? He says, Bruce. So Batman being the world's greatest detective, knowing that Superman knows his identity, wouldn't that hint to him that, oh, he would know my mother's name? But no, he's like, save mother. Why would Superman even say that? He calls his mom mother. So I would think if I was Batman and Superman said this, I would immediately think this guy's trying to emotionally manipulate me. That's exactly what would happen. Save Martha. What is her name? They were trying to rip off a scene in Flashpoint where when Flash comes to the Batcave and he's in the alternate timeline where Thomas Wayne became Batman because Bruce died and Martha became the Joker because Bruce died. He comes in to the Batcave and he says Bruce, and Thomas Wayne says, "Why did you say that name?" And that scene, it makes context because Flash thought Thomas Wayne was dead and thought Bruce Wayne was still Batman. So it was a total ripoff. Like I said, the man's a hack. He can't produce anything original, and every time he tries, like with Sucker Punch, it just ends up becoming a disaster, a laughable one. And even 300, the one movie that I say that he directed that's good, that was all because of Frank Miller, who wrote the graphic novel that the film is based on. That had nothing to do with Zack Snyder's talent, and I stand by that statement. But again, these directors who call their audiences idiots, who say we let them down. No, produce better content, produce good content, and maybe we'll give you the time of the day. We don't owe you anything. We do not owe you the benefit of the doubt. We do not owe you our attention. We do not owe you our time. If you want to put butts in seats, then you better produce a good and better project. So I don't want to hear it from these guys who spend more money on their hairspray than I do on groceries in a month. So spare me. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you'll give it a thumbs up, that you'll leave me a comment and tell me what you think, that you'll share it out with your friends, and of course, consider subscribing to Studio Jake. I cover all kinds of nerd and pop culture topics, including film, television, anime, comic books, and so much more. I hope that you'll also head over to my main website, StudioJakeMedia.com, where I have even more news, views, and commentary. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, head over to my locals page. That's studiojakemedia.locals.com. It's the best way to support me. I'm trying to build a little community there. I have exclusive reviews and articles, so definitely head over there and check it out. And I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.